There must be war. God wills it!
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Unpopular Opinion, and today I am going to be reviewing the Ridley Scott directed movie Kingdom of Heaven.
An army of Jesus Christ which bears his holy cross cannot be beaten.
Guys, a little background about myself. I am a massive history geek, and I'm actually training to become a historian. And the Crusades is something that I actually focus a lot of my scholarly work on. So the history of the Crusades, I take it very seriously, and I happen to have a lot of Crusader apparel. Like, in my daily life, you will not see me not wearing Crusader shirts, medallions. I have a lot of Crusader goodies and trinkets, and I make references to the Crusades literally all the time. So I really love the history of the Crusades. I take it very seriously. I hold it very near and dear to my heart. So today, your fellow Crusader geek is going to be reviewing Kingdom of Heaven. Guys, Kingdom of Heaven is about the Crusades, and it is the Crusade movie. So every movie in every major time period pretty much just has one super iconic movie that just represents it. And it just really encompasses everything about it and everyone knows it. So for example, for World War II, Saving Private Ryan is the World War II movie. So that's what Kingdom of Heaven is for the Crusader period. So today, guys, I'm just going to be reviewing the movie. I'm going to be discussing what I liked, what I didn't like, and the too long didn't read version of this summary is I love this movie. I think it's a really good movie. Visually, it's stunning. The battle sequences, the action, oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's full of great actors who turned out a lot of really good performances, and when you listen to the music, if you look at the scenery, it really does feel like you're back in the medieval period. The music, the visuals, it's all great. But on the flip side, guys, this is a very historically inaccurate movie. And it kind of pushes narratives that are unfair and untrue in reference to the Crusades. But I'm going to be getting into the nitty-gritty on the history of the movie much later in the review. But my friends, before we get into the topic itself, we are going to be playing a little game. Guys, at the end of this video, I am going to be playing a quick 5-second clip from a random movie. If you are the first person to correctly identify the title of the movie which this clip comes from and you comment it below, I will pin your comment to the top of the comments and I'm gonna give you a shout out in the next video. So all you have to do is stick around till the end of the video, watch that quick 5-second clip from a random movie, then comment it below. If you're the first person to do that, you win. But to clarify, guys, you have to put the full title of the movie in the comment. So random non-specific example, if it's from Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest, you can't just say Pirates of the Caribbean. You have to say Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest or Star Wars Revenge of the Sith or something. If you do that, you are the winner. And guys, shout out to last video's winner, Keith Hopkins, 8593. Congratulations, you were the one to successfully guess last video's movie was To Hell and Back starring Audie Murphy. Congratulations, you were the winner. So guys, the plot of this movie is French blacksmith Balian goes to the Holy Land in a time in between the Second and Third Crusade prior to the fall of Christian Jerusalem. So Balian was born out of wedlock and he was introduced to his father Godfrey. Godfrey is the Baron of Ibelin and he's making his way back to the Kingdom of Jerusalem.
I have 100 men at arms in Jerusalem.
So he offers to take Balian with him.
If you will come with me, you will have a living.
But Godfrey gets mortally wounded on the way, so he knights Balian and makes him the next Baron of Ibelin.
Arise, a knight, and Baron of Ibelin.
And the rest of the movie is Balian navigating his way around Jerusalem, and you see him interacting with real-life historical figures prior to the city falling in 1187. So putting aside the historical inaccuracies for now, let's just talk about why I like this movie. So visually, it really does bring you back to the medieval period. And the music that accompanies pretty much all of the scenes is really spectacular. It feels spiritual, it also feels medieval, and it just jacks you up. So I think that aspect, you know, the visuals and all that good stuff really does capture that aspect of the medieval period very well. Not only that, but the costumes, the armor, most of the weapons looked pretty good. And I happen to think that Balian is an awesome protagonist.
Old man, where is it that Christ was crucified?
It kind of reminds me of those old school video games, those old school fantasy or medieval games, where our hero starts off in extreme humble origins, then he's introduced to his destiny, and then along the way he gets training, weapons, he gets upgrades, and after each level, it gets harder and harder until he has to face off against the ultimate boss. That's kind of like how it unfolds in the movie. For example, he meets his father. His father gives him a brief sword fighting training lesson around a campfire in a really awesome medieval forest setting, and then his first test of skill and grit in combat is when the other warriors come to ambush them, and there's this epic fight, which was awesome.
I say he's innocent of the charge. If you say he's guilty, then we'll fight. God will decide the truth of it.
Then after that, you see him duke it out with that guy in the desert, and then he assumes control over his father's lands in the Holy Land. You see him dressed in all these really cool, awesome costumes, equipped with fine weaponry, materials, and then he's rubbing shoulders with all these awesome people. I always found that really fascinating. It, again, reminds me of those old school fantasy and medieval games. Or, I don't know, those old school legends, because every time Balian encounters a new character, for the most part, they say something to the effect of, I knew your father was my friend, therefore I'm your friend. I loved that.
It's true. You're your father's son. He was my friend. I'm yours.
Jeremy Irons' character of Tiberius was just a really cool guy. I loved his grace. I loved his diplomacy. I loved the way he conducted himself. He was a really great companion to Balian.
Those Templars have been hung for a raid that I know you commanded. Prove it.
And overall, I just found the interactions between King Baldwin and Balian to be really fascinating.
God does not know me. That's what I do.
And each time Balian comes across an obstacle and he overcomes it, he manages to overcome it, he levels up. And then after that, he has to face more intense obstacles and more intense challenges. For example, he had to protect those peasants fleeing from the Muslims. He and his troops get schwacked, his troops get wiped out, but he manages to survive. And then after that, he has to defend the city of Jerusalem from Saladin.
I should go to Cyprus. Will you come with me?
No.
You are your father's son. God be with you. He's no longer with me.
That was just pretty interesting from a storytelling point of view, and it kind of reminded me of the hero's journey, so I liked that. In terms of Balian being a protagonist, I just thought he was an interesting character because he was a damaged individual who's struggling with his faith.
God does not speak to me. Not even on the hill where Christ died. There's your religion. One spark, a creosote bush. There's your Moses. I am outside God's grace. I have lost my religion. I did not hear it speak.
But on top of that, he wants to save the soul of his dead wife and his unborn child, but he's got to come to grips with what he's encountering, what he's seeing.
Do you love her?
Yes.
The heart will mend.
And what he's experiencing in the Holy Land, it is kind of like a disillusioning moment for his faith. And I just thought that was a pretty cool aspect of his character.
Is this why you came to the Holy Land? Come on!
But ultimately, he steps up to huge challenges and to face his destiny head on. I mean, even though by all rights, the dude should not have been equipped with the experience to do what he did, his character, he was very smart, and I love the way he postured himself. The way he conducted himself, he was a pretty admirable guy. And he really did live up to those vows that he took when he was getting knighted. So he really did live up to the standards of knights.
We defend this city, not to protect these stones, but the people living within these walls.
So I just really love virtuous protagonists because grace, dignity, and honor goes a long way for me. That's why I think Balian, played by Orlando Bloom, was excellent. I also found the Hospitaller character to be super cool.
Put no stock in religion.
He was an interesting, wise mentor type character.
I've seen the lunacy of fanatics of every denomination be called the will of God.
Who would appear, then he would disappear. He's full of wisdom.
It does not mean that there is no God. Your duty is to the people of the city.
He was played super cool, and he was like the epitome of the mysterious warrior monk, and that was just powerful stuff.
I go to pray.
For what?
For the strength to endure what is to come.
And guys, the action in this movie was just phenomenal. The battles, superb. I loved the individual sword fighting, the one-on-one combat. I mean, guys, Ridley Scott knows how to direct action. The direction techniques he used, the lighting, the cinematography, the close-ups, the editing, the pacing, all of that accompanied with that great music was sublime. Those battle sequences were really fun and exciting. And I even liked some of the battle speeches prior to the epic combat.
Be brave and upright, that God may love thee.
But to be fair, not every part of the movie was awesome and epic. There were some slow and boring parts, but I digress. That's not enough to detract from the great movie.
Benedicimus Domine. Behold your rightful king and heir.
Lastly, this movie was full of magnificent actors who turned out great performances. Honestly, no one in this movie phoned it in. They all did phenomenal jobs. Now, let's talk about the historical inaccuracies of this movie, because there are plenty. Firstly, this movie seems to have an anti-Christian bias because it makes the Christians seem like they're evil and colonizers who do nothing but antagonize the Muslims. The priest and the bishops and the clergy, they're all kind of represented as barbarians.
Kill an infidel, the Pope has said, is not murder. It is the path to heaven.
Greedy and cowards.
They must ask for terms.
Convert to Islam. Repent later.
And a lot of the Knights Templar are just portrayed as bloodthirsty savages who do nothing but warmonger.
That sort of Christianity has its uses, I suppose.
So it does portray Christians in a bad and unfair way, but it doesn't offend me. I would just caution people and tell them that this is a movie that takes a lot of liberties with the historical reality. And when you're watching, just to keep that in mind and take everything you see with a grain of salt. But to be fair to what I just said, the three most morally outstanding, virtuous people in the film are Christians. So we've got Balian, King Baldwin, and the Hospitaller. So that's gotta count for something. But something that really does bother me is how the whole movie misrepresents the Crusades and the overall attitude towards them. There are two scenes in the movie to me where the overall motivation behind the Crusades are very miscategorized in a sneaky, disingenuous way. So there's a scene in the movie where Balian and the Knights Hospitaller are witnessing Templars getting hanged, and it's explained that they're being executed because they attacked a Saracen caravan. To which Balian responds,
So they are dying for what the Pope would command them to do.
Yes, but not Christ, I think.
and that actually bothers me because it's very misleading. Yes, it's historical fact that when Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade, he said that those who take up the cross and die in battle or on the way to fight the Muslims get remission of sins. He did not, however, instruct people to indiscriminately kill people randomly and to attack innocent non-Christians. That line is complete nonsense. And to prove this, when the People's Crusade in 1096, led by Peter the Hermit, started attacking Jewish communities and settlements in the Rhineland, the Catholic Church condemned those attacks, and there were clergy who tried to protect the Jews at great personal risk to themselves. Now, overall, unfortunately, that had little effect.
You've told me a lot about religion, Your Eminence.
But the idea that the Pope and the Church commanded Catholics to attack innocent people was not true. And I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. You guys are probably on the verge of commenting something right now about how in 1099, when the Crusaders captured Jerusalem, they massacred the civilian population in the city. Don't worry, I am going to address that later in the video. But in reference to that scene where Templars are getting hung, knights in the Kingdom of Jerusalem who threatened the peace or did an unauthorized attack on the Saracens, they would be punished, and that's probably what happened in this scene, which was just misrepresented by that quote.
That witness, if you call him that, is a Saracen. He lies.
And the other scene that really misrepresents the Crusades and the Crusaders was when Balian and Jeremy Irons' character, they witnessed the aftermath of the Battle of Hattin. And Tiberius says, the quote,
I've given Jerusalem my whole life. First I thought we were fighting for God. Then I realized we were fighting for wealth and land. I was ashamed.
Now that line is supposed to make us, the viewers, believe that the entire purpose of the Crusades was just European colonialism, and that the Crusaders were motivated by power and money alone, which is beyond untrue. This is one myth about the Crusades that really bothers me, because there's a lot of people who say that the Crusades was just Europeans' early experimentation with imperialism, and that they unprovoked attacked the Islamic world. world. Now, I want to make something very clear. I am not attaching any politics, morals, or anything other than historical facts with the statements I'm going to make. When people regurgitate this narrative about the Crusades, like the movie does, that really annoys me. It should be noted that the Islamic world had been waging war against Christendom for literally 400 years prior to the First Crusade. So much of what was once originally Christian land was conquered by the Muslims. Such lands would include North Africa, Palestine, the Iberian Peninsula, Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. I mean, in 846, Arab raiders sacked the capital of the Catholic world by raiding Rome, and they deliberately desecrated St. Peter's Basilica and St. Paul's Basilica. Now, imagine for a minute if today most Muslim-majority countries were conquered by Christians, and then a Southern Baptist went to Mecca, and then he spray-painted the black stone in the sacred moss. No one would say that an armed response directed at Christians was unjustified. It's just obvious double standards when it comes to the Crusades. And this idea that the Crusades was just like a European attempt to colonize people in the Middle East, to extort them, to steal their land, to steal their money, that's just absurd to me. I mean, the fact of the matter is, every time the Crusaders would wage war against the Muslims, when they completed their objectives or when the war was over, a lot of them would just leave and go home. Yes, it is true that there were Crusader states established in the Levant after the First Crusade, but the fact remains, if your objective was to establish colonies and to take over that land, you wouldn't have your army just turn around and go home after the conquest was complete. The original objective of the First Crusade was to help the Byzantine Empire, who had been struggling in a very long fight against the Seljuk Turks. The idea was to liberate the Holy Land and take back the holy city of Jerusalem, which had been in Muslim hands for a very long time. And the Pope did tell people that if they went on crusade and they completed their objectives, through the power of God with which he was invested, they would be granted remission of their sins. This was a huge spiritual incentive for a lot of soldiers to go on crusade, because a lot of them, being that they were in a profession of violence, lived in fear of eternal damnation. They didn't want to burn in hell. And I would argue there were more crusaders who went on crusade to actually save their soul, to redeem themselves, and to get their sins forgiven, than to go pillage, wage war, loot, and take land for themselves. So I'm not convinced that the Crusaders went to war for land. And to prove my point, like I said, once the wars were over, once the objectives were complete, a lot of them would just go home, much like how American soldiers in Vietnam, once their tour duty was up, they're going back. So that's just really bad empire skills and imperialism if you just have your army leave the area. And that was actually a common complaint of people in the Crusader states in the time period. Whenever the crusading armies would leave, they were left extremely vulnerable. Those in the Crusader states were left underdefended and vulnerable, surrounded by a much larger Islamic force. And to prove my point even more, I'm about to read you a real-life document from the 13th century, Humbert of the Romans. He wrote this. It was a real-life criticism of the Crusades from the time period where they actually were going on. Humbert was the former Grand Master for the Dominican Order, and he wrote the following. Other people are asking, what is the point of this attack on the Saracens? For they're not roused to conversion by it, but rather are stirred up against the Christian faith. When we are victorious and have killed them, moreover, we send them to hell, which seems to be against the law of charity. Also, when we gain their lands, we do not occupy them like colonists, because our countrymen do not want to stay in those regions. So that's an actual criticism of the Crusades during the time period it was going on. So need I say more? That whole quote disproves that stupid line from the movie. There's a couple other things I want to address about the film's historical inaccuracies. The movie leaves out certain historical context and information when it presents factual, correct information. So it'll present something that's factually correct, but then they'll deliver it in a way that's misleading or that's not completely correct because they're leaving out certain aspects of the fact. So many times in the movie, Balian will say that when the Crusaders in 1099 captured Jerusalem, they massacred the civilians in the city.
The reckoning is to come for what was done 100 years before.
The Christians butchered every Muslim within the walls when they took this city.
The Muslims will never forget, nor should they.
That is historical fact. That really did happen. So when Jerusalem was taken in 1099, the Crusaders killed the people there, killed the civilians, and there were parts of the city that accounts say there were rivers of blood that were ankle deep. So this was an act of extreme brutality, and it was an unfortunate thing, but that really did happen. But the thing that the movie leaves out is that was common in the medieval period. Any city that didn't surrender prior to a siege was subjected to any and all consequences of the besieging army when it conquered the area. So this wasn't a breach of the rules of engagement, and it was not unusual for the time. The movie tries to make it seem like such an act was an evil atrocity that was an isolated incident or a one-time thing that only the Christians did. But the Crusaders, they did the same thing when they took back the city of Antioch. And believe it or not, the Muslims, they actually did the same thing when they took cities. The Fatimids had done so themselves at Taormina and at Rometta and Tyre in the 10th century. And I'm not excusing such behavior because that's clearly wrong, but there's just something I really hate about people in the modern age who look back on people of the past and judge them and hold them to the standards of our modern morals, philosophies, and standards.
You go to certain death.
All death is certain. I shall tell your father what I've seen you become.
I mean, these people lived under completely different circumstances and principles. So I think judging people of the past with modern societal standards, it's just not appropriate, especially when both sides engaged in the same behavior. And such acts were not considered shocking or unusual to the people who lived in that time period. Other inaccuracies that I want to include is the opening text is wrong. So Europe was not actually in a state of repression and poverty in the 1100s. That's actually a lie. King Baldwin IV died in 1185.
When I was 16, I won a great victory. I felt in that moment I would live to be 100.
So the timeline of his life presented in the movie is incorrect because the movie would make it seem like Baldwin died a little bit before the Muslims retook Jerusalem, when in actuality, the Muslims took back Jerusalem in 1187. So the timeline of his life is a little wrong.
Now I know I shall not see 30.
Also, there is no record to suggest that King Baldwin wore his iconic metal mask that we see in the movie to cover his face. That was just invented for the film. That he didn't wear that in real life.
I pray you pull back your cavalry and leave this matter to me.
I pray you retire unharmed to Damascus.
Our main character, Balian, is not at all accurate to the real-life Balian of Ebelin. So in the movie, he's a blacksmith who was born out of wedlock to a knight named Godfrey, and in the movie, he's from France. When in actuality, the real-life Balian was born in the Kingdom of Jerusalem. He wasn't born out of wedlock. His father's name wasn't Godfrey, it was Barrison. He also wasn't an only child. Movie Balian is nothing like the real-life historical figure. Also, the ending battle, it's not quite accurate. So in real life, after the Battle of Hattin, Balian, the real-life Balian, escaped to Tyre. And he asked Saladin for permission to go back to the city of Jerusalem so he can get his family and leave safely, to which Saladin said, "I'll let you do it, but you have to promise to stay in the city for only one day and to never take up arms against me." To which Balian agreed. So when Balian got back to the city of Jerusalem, the Latin patriarch, the city's inhabitants, and Queen Sibylla, they begged him to take up defense of the city of Jerusalem, to lead the defenders, because after the Battle of Hattin, the Christian army was wiped out and the city was very, very vulnerable to Saladin.
There is no more Jerusalem. Saladin must move his army from water to water. That gives him 4 days, maybe 5.
In real life, Balian was a little reluctant because he had made an oath to Saladin not to take up arms against him, but the Latin patriarch absolved him of that oath, and Balian agreed to lead the defense of the city. That's a really cool aspect that was left out of the movie, unfortunately, and that's something that I would have loved to have seen. Also, there are some sequences and weapons that aren't accurate. So when you see soldiers dumping boiling oil over the city walls, that's not really accurate. Those siege towers and those massive crossbow things used to knock over the siege towers, again, that's not really accurate to how the actual siege went. Don't get me wrong, that looks really cool and that's awesome for a movie epic cinematic experience, but that's just not authentic to what happened. And the surrender of Jerusalem, in the movie, it's actually a lot more PG than what happened in real life. In the movie, Saladin said he will be merciful and spare the city, and that's pretty much the end of it. So if the Christians just leave, he'll accept their surrender. In real life, Saladin wanted an unconditional surrender, but Balian threatened to kill the 5,000 Muslims in Jerusalem, as well as destroying the Dome of the Rock and Islamic holy sites. That was his one bargaining chip that he used against Saladin. Saladin's counteroffer was, I'll accept your surrender and I'm gonna not kill the people of the city, but all of those who wish to leave Jerusalem, they have to pay a ransom, and if you can't afford the ransom, you will be enslaved.
That's the best deal you're gonna get. I won't tell you can save yourself, because you can't.
Then under these terms, I surrender Jerusalem.
But Saladin was actually pretty lenient and freed a lot of the people he enslaved, and he actually forgave Balian for breaking his promise.
What is Jerusalem worth?
Nothing. Everything.
So in the end, Jerusalem was taken and it fell back into Muslim hands. Also, minor difference that I will nitpick, the movie shows Saladin to be, you know, they're a little more flattering to Saladin than he was in real life. The movie makes it seem like he's the epitome of mercy, grace, understanding, and tolerance, when in actuality, the guy could have been really brutal when he wanted to. The prime example of this is after his victory in the Battle of Hattin, all the Knights Templar and all the Hospitallers who were captured, all 200 of them, he killed them. He had them executed on the spot. But some things that the movie did do correct was the build up to the Battle of Hattin was actually pretty well done. The Christians were cut off from water. You see them marching through the hot desert heat, which dehydrates them and weakens them. And then the Muslims annihilated them, which left the Kingdom of Jerusalem extremely vulnerable. And there's a scene where Saladin offered to send King Baldwin his physicians. Now, there is nothing to suggest that Baldwin and Saladin met face to face, but Saladin was that kind of guy. There's an interesting episode in the Third Crusade where King Richard the Lionhearted fell ill during the Siege of Acre, and Saladin sent him fruit and ice to wish him a speedy recovery, because that's the kind of guy Saladin was. This was the time period where there were noble enemies who would offer gestures of good faith. So that is actually something Saladin would have done, sending King Baldwin physicians. But I don't think he actually did that. But yeah, guys, those are the main things I really wanted to talk about in reference to Kingdom of Heaven and the history it portrayed. Now, as a historical movie, it's a disgrace. But as an actual piece of art, guys, this movie's awesome. It's a magnificent film, but guys, I'm in a pickle, because when it comes to historical movies, I always have the mindset of, if it's historically inaccurate but entertaining, I'm still gonna love it. Prime example would be Braveheart. Braveheart's in the same boat. It is so historically inaccurate, but it is so good. And there's a lot of history buffs who hate this mindset. They hate the mindset of, you can't like a movie if it's historically inaccurate, and then entertaining, it's just not fair, you can't do it. But to quote Renaud de Chatillon,
I am what I am. Someone has to be.
So again, to me, if a movie is historically inaccurate but it's entertaining, I'm still gonna like it. But if it's both historically accurate and entertaining, I'm gonna love it even more. Master and Commander, I'm looking at you, buddy.
After all, surprise is on our side.
But unfortunately, Kingdom of Heaven doesn't have that going for it. But I could still appreciate the movie for what it is, what it accomplished, and how entertaining it is. But not for naught, this movie's kind of become just one giant meme. Anytime you want to see Crusader memes or Christian memes, you'll almost always see those images of King Baldwin. You will always see Crusader memes featuring this movie. So I guess that's the legacy of Kingdom of Heaven. So if you've never seen the movie, I recommend that you watch it. But, you know, if you're one of those people, you've never seen the movie and you do decide to watch it, or you're having a boys' night, you know, Bible study at my house, we're gonna watch Kingdom of Heaven, you can watch it to be entertained. But don't expect to learn anything historical from it, and every bit of history you see in the movie, take it with a grain of salt and recognize this is just a movie that took a lot of liberties with the historical reality. But guys, that is Kingdom of Heaven. So what did you think? Do you guys agree with me? Do you disagree? Well, comment below to let me know. Also, guys, I enjoyed making this video, so if you want to see me react to more historical movies to assess things they got right, things they got wrong, and then to give my opinion on the movie from a critical point of view as well, I'd be more than happy to do that. You just comment below to let me know. know. Also guys, remember to like this video and to subscribe to my channel. Costs you nothing to do so. It's totally free, and believe it or not, just one like can go a long way, and it really, really helps me out. Also, check me out on Instagram. That will be linked in the description below. And that's all I have for you guys. Remember that 5-second clip is coming up very shortly. If you want to guess what it is and shoot your shot at getting yourself a shout out and pin to the top of the comments, you go ahead. Well, that's all I have for you, and I'll see you in the next Unpopular Opinion. Deus Vult.
Back in.